Good evening, all. My name is Christopher, last initial G. I am an alcoholic. I live in Jacksonville, Florida, area 14, district 30. For those of you that are familiar with that, it's Northeast Florida. I am a Alcoholics Anonymous member in good standing. And what does that mean? That means I don't drink. That means I don't drug. Drugs are in my story. Out of respect for AA, I will leave that out and refer to them as outside issues if it does play a part. I have a sobriety date. It is not my first, and God willing, it will be my last. That sobriety date is February 22nd of 2012. I am a sponsor who has a sponsor who has a sponsor, and I sponsor men who sponsor other men. So now that we got all that out the way, I'm honored tonight to speak at the Serenity Improvement Group. I've been reading Stephen's stuff for a long time, and I use it frequently with my sponsees and with my group members. It's a lot of good information. So I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to participate. So my story, what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. Well, what I was like, I was a complete unmanageable mess. So I'm going to talk about the steps tonight, and I'm even going to talk about God tonight. Oh my goodness, talking about God in an AA meeting. Hold your chair. So step one for me was pretty much the first 37, 38 years of my life. I could give you a lot of reasons why I drank, but none of those things made me an alcoholic. You know, I'm an alcoholic because I drink alcoholically. I got no reason to blame it on anybody or anything today. I don't blame it on the fact that I was molested as a child, or the fact that I grew up with parents with conflicting religious ideals. All I know is that I was a confused and very uncomfortable child until the age of 10 years old, when I first put alcohol into my body. Something changed. I got a hold of a bottle of Jack Daniels, and somehow I managed to drink the whole thing and live. And you can imagine what happened to a young kid at a young age drinking that much alcohol. But, something happened to me. Something changed. I felt comfortable for the first time. And I spent the next 27 years of my life seeking that same feeling. And, for me, that ended up in a lot of different ways. I didn't black out every time I drank, but every time I drank, I got drunk, except for the very last time, which I'll get to later. I mentioned I have a sobriety date. It's not my first one. I had many signs that I was an alcoholic. I come from a family of alcoholics. I come from a long line of people. My grandfather died at 47 from cirrhosis. I could sit here and give you all kinds of reasons, but I don't use those as excuses anymore. There's been times when I used to in my recovery. What I do know today is that I have a disease of more. I have a spiritual void inside of me that only a power greater than myself can fill. I'm powerless over alcohol. Well, what does that mean? That means when I drink, I can't control how much or what I do, what I say, who I'm with, where I end up, what I'm going to remember. I'm sure we've all had the feeling of waking up in the morning one day and trying to politely, sneakily ask the people around you what you did last night. Well, I've had too many of those days. And what happened to me, is much like most of us. I was unmanageable. I was a juvenile delinquent. I was looking at going to prison after getting arrested many times. I had 7 felonies by the time I was 15. I couldn't get alcohol. I couldn't get outside issues. and I needed things. I had to steal, and I got caught. I was a criminal by the time I was a very young person. And like any good alcoholic, I fell in love, and my emotions overpowered me, and it kept me out of prison. Thank God. I met a woman, and we got serious, and one thing led to another, and I got her pregnant, and she was 16. I was 17. So I've got amends to make, for the rest of my life. I've got an amends to make because we ended up having an abortion with that child. I share that as part of my story because that was the last part of a relationship that I had with another female until I was 25 years old. And that plays an important part in my drinking because I remained celibate and alone for almost 8 years, just doing nothing but drinking myself to a point of inebriation over and over and over again. Every day was the same, right? You ever hear that song? Every day was exactly the same. Well, that was me. This alcoholic, I ended up at a point where my my health started failing. I'm not going to go chronologically here because I could spend most of my share on the problem, and I don't want to do that because the problem only plays a short portion of my story. I've had the gift of living two lives in one lifetime. One as a drunk and one as a sober alcoholic. But what happened to me was I would drink a whole bunch. I would starve myself, drink a whole bunch, and then eat a whole bunch of food and pass out. And I did this over and over and over again for years until it started rotting out my intestines, my gut. I still have GI problems to this day from alcohol. This alcoholic chose alcohol over food. My main source of nourishment was alcohol. I ended up in the hospital in 2010, and they told me I was going to die, and I didn't care. And at this point in my life, I had my own business. I had 4 kids. I had a wife. I had a house. Nothing mattered to me anymore. I didn't care about anything, including my own life. And when they told me that I was going to die, it affected me so much. I went out and got drunk to prove them wrong. Isn't that what we do as defiant alcoholics? Go out and do something that they tell us that we can't. Does anybody identify with that? So, I could tell you 100 stories, but there's a couple of key ones that drive me to where I'm at today. The first one was I met the woman of my dreams, my wife. When I was 25 years old, I went to my brother's wedding, and she walks in the door, and there's just this glow around her. I don't know if it was the outside issues or if it was, God or what, but she's the one that ended up leading me to God. I fell in love instantly, and for the first time, I had a relationship in a long, long time. 3 days after I met her, I asked her to move in with me. 3 weeks later, she did. 3 months later, we were married. God willing, on Valentine's Day next year, it'll be 25 years. And she stuck with me through all of this. Okay. And I share that because she's seen me at my worst. I mean, I walked out on her twice, told her to keep the house, keep the kids, keep the business, just quit killing my buzz. That's how important alcohol was to me. I needed it to survive. So anyway, I had a wake up call in 2009. Probably the most shameful moment of my life. One of my buddies, he turned 40. Okay, so we did him right. We got him a wheelchair and an oxygen tank. And we had a party, but see, there was a problem. At this party, there was an open bar. And at this point in time, I knew that I couldn't drink liquor anymore. I had made enough problems with liquor, but when you say open bar, that kind of makes the rules go away for that night. And, I was a big Dungeons and Dragons player. I was a Magic the Gathering person. Any MTGers out there? No, I was just an overgrown child, basically. And these are the guys that I would party with, right? And about 3 hours into this party, they're pulling me away. Come on, man, you're acting like an idiot. You need to leave. You've had enough, time to go. And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? It's an open bar. I'm not going anywhere. Well, I come to the next morning. You notice I didn't say I woke up because I don't remember anything after that. And what I'm about to share with you is what I was told. And to this day, it still pains me to think about it. But this woman that I love, she came up to me and tried to drag me away from this open bar. And I took my wedding ring off my finger and I went like this. And I just threw it as far as I could. And every time I tell this part of my story, I get chills, I get emotional, because I can't imagine what she must have felt in that moment. That the alcohol was more important than my marriage. It was more important than my children, than anything to me. And when she told me this, I was absolutely mortified in the morning. See, because I don't know about you, but when I drink, something happens to me and it changes me into a different person. And I get a different personality. I get a different set of motives and agenda. And, I don't think about anyone else, their feelings, nothing, right? It's all about me. So once I found out what I had done, I immediately scooped up 3 of my employees and we went over there and scoured that place for like 4 hours looking for my wedding ring. And, to this day, I've never found it. And I went without a wedding ring for many years in sobriety until I was convinced that I had learned enough about my drinking that I would not drink again, knock on wood. But this woman stuck with me. Today she's the love of my life. I love her more every day. I'm capable of love today, which I wasn't capable of before. See, love to me was always something selfish. And I'm sharing about all this in step 1 because it's unmanageability, right? Love today is something that means something. Love is letting others voluntarily evolve, like Al-Anon says, a great acronym for love. So the problem is that I didn't have this ability to control my emotions. See, something else I could blame it on. I'm diagnosed with mental disorder. I could name 5 or 6 different ones that I have, but I don't believe at that time that I believed it. I was in doubt, more unmanageability. I had a problem with taking medication, and I started hearing things in the rooms of AA about, you're not sober if you take medication. Folks, if you ever hear that, please ignore it. We have a pamphlet written specifically for that, AA and types of medication. We are not doctors. We are not therapists. We are just a bunch of drunks that have an answer for staying sober. But for whatever reason, I waited 8 years before I sought help with medication anyway. So my unmanageability continued in the rooms. Okay, by the time I got to the rooms, I was a mess. I came into the rooms and let's see, my first white chip, we have chips out here in North Florida where we denote lengths of sobriety. The white chip is the universal sign of surrender. I picked up my first white chip on November 23rd, 2010. And I white knuckled it for a total of 9 days, and I stayed sober. 9 days, dry is a better way to put it. I didn't drink. I was still under the marijuana maintenance program, but I wasn't drinking, okay? Then I came back 32 days later. I picked up another chip, 12/26/2010. No program, no sponsor. Still trying to run my life myself in AA. Still unmanageable in AA. Okay, I'm not talking to anybody. I'm not sharing meetings. I'm not sharing at meetings. I'm not reading. I'm just kind of sticking my toe in the water. If you're new, please don't do that. Don't do that. We had a guy show up a couple of weeks ago at my home group, his very first meeting. He had a sponsor before he left the room. You know, please help these new people not make the same mistakes that we all make. Third try, 129.11, I picked up my white chip. I got a sponsor. I picked the oldest guy in the room that I had absolutely nothing in common with, and then I didn't do anything he told me to do. What do you think happened? I drank again, right? So I come back the fourth time. Well, I managed to stay sober 68 days that time. I come back the fourth time, and this time I got a guy that was active in treatment. There's a treatment center out here called Gateway that's pretty well known, and he was bringing a meeting in there, and I started bringing meetings into the treatment center. Well, I had never been into treatment. I had only been to jail. I'd never been to treatment. I'd never been to the nut house yet. But this guy, he convinced me to start going to treatment, and his theory, he was a PPG guy, if you know what that is. Primary purpose group. There's a group out of Dallas that has this book that, whatever. It's not conference approved stuff, but it worked for me at the time. And his theory was to get you through the 12 steps as quickly as possible. And after 11 days, I was on step 9. Only I made a huge mistake. I left out the most shameful thing that I'd ever done in my life. And I didn't tell him about it. And I wasn't able to remain sober. But see, there was a problem now. I was plugged into AA. I started making friends and opening up. 136 days I stayed sober. And when I relapsed, I didn't tell anybody. Okay, I didn't think you'd remember. So, you know, we got different colors of chips. We got the white chip, then we got the brown chip for 30 days, the red chip for 90, yellow 6 months, green 9 months, blue 1 year anniversary. So I picked up a 30-day chip, I picked up a 60-day chip, I picked up a 90-day chip during this 136-day period. And I share this because this is still part of my unmanageability in Alcoholics Anonymous. Even though I thought I was working steps, I was still on step 1 until I was about 2 years sober. Okay. And I'm going to tell you why right now. Because, folks, when I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous for the 5th time, I never picked up a white chip. My ego would not let me. Because I was afraid of what you were going to think of me. I was so full of fear. I can see it as fear today. Then I could not. But, you know, I never picked up the 6-month chip, the 9-month, even the 1-year chip, folks. I never picked up another chip until I was 2 years sober. Because in my mind, you would not have remembered how long it was. So I sit here telling you that I thought I had worked the steps. I was bringing meetings into treatment centers, but I was still unmanageable in Alcoholics Anonymous, still practicing dishonesties. And when I share this part of my story, I'm ashamed of it, to think that I wasted all these years. But then something happened to me, and I began to work step 2. I met this beautiful person named Tanya M. And for those of you from Jacksonville that are here tonight, thank you for coming, by the way, but you remember Tanya M. because this is the kind of person you don't forget when you meet her. Okay, I had the privilege of interviewing her at her 40-year anniversary before she passed. But this is the person that introduced me to God. And she quickly became my AA mama, is what I used to call her. I got my birth mama, then I got my AA mama. Well, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I was going to this meeting called Serenity at noon, and she was involved in that meeting. And we'd read from the book every Monday at noon. And, for some reason, I was just attracted to her aura, you want what we have, you do what we do, is what we say. And this person just had this peace about them. And as I learned more about her, I realized that she was a dumpster diving, low bottom drunk, which I was not. I had a problem with the unmanageability part, because when I got here, I still had a house, a car, my freedom, money in the bank. I owned my business. I was married. I had a house. I had kids. Where's unmanageability? Well, I just spent the last 15 minutes describing it in my life. And I brought it with me to Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I got to step 2, Tanya, she showed me that there was love in this book. She wasn't my sponsor, but she was the person that I went to when I had questions about love. And, I'll share more about her in a minute, but the step says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Okay, could is the key word to me. And if I got to be restored to something, that means I've lost it somewhere along the line. Okay, and sitting in these meetings, we'd read the whole book. And if you read the stories in the back of the book, which some people aren't a fan of, and if you're not a fan, I'd encourage you to think about it again, because the book says they introduce the way that each person came to believe in a power greater than themselves. That's the purpose of the stories in the back of the book. The ones from number 1, 2, and 3 editions you can find in another book called Experience, Strength, and Hope. The stories are a beautiful thing, because they taught me that even I, with my confused, my father an atheist, my mom a Southern Baptist, I got this confusing militant type mentality on one side, and this whatever mentality on the other side. It's the story of my life. So she told me that I had to make a decision. Did I want my old life back? Because it's always there waiting for me. Or did I want to try something different? Are you ready to be happy yet? Were her words to me. Now, this wasn't my sponsor, but this was someone that I respected. Okay, my sponsor, when I hit about 2 years sober, right about this time, actually, he got 10-year-itis. 10-year-itis. And if you don't know what that is, that's where you just vanish off the face of Alcoholics Anonymous and you disappear for a while. And, I sent him emails and letters and called him, left him text messages, voice messages. 6 months went by and the guy never responded to me. And, he's been gone for a long time. This was 2 years. This has been 10 years now, and I've only seen him once in all that time. So why do I share that? Because Tanya filled a role, and she told me that in step 3, I had to make a decision. Do I want the problem or do I want the solution? That's really all step 3 is for me. And I decided I wanted the solution. I knew the problem. I wanted the solution. So I decided it was time to do another inventory. But in order to do that, I needed to get another sponsor. So I did. I found another sponsor, and you know, my sponsorship theory is maybe jaded because I've had such bad experience with sponsors. My first one I didn't listen to. My second one disappeared. My third one was my sponsor's sponsor, and then he moved. My fourth one, oh man, he was working 13 steps, and I was constantly taking his inventory. So, the sponsor I have today, he's a peaceful, loving, joyful man. Um, I asked him to sponsor me on January 17, 2017, and we've developed such a good relationship. Uh, he's helped me understand the steps. See, I got a problem is that I'm smart. And smart guys have a hard time in AA, okay, because they got to get real dumb real quick. My way wasn't working, but I thought it could. I thought. My problem centers in my mind, not my body. That's what my book tells me. But I knew I needed to work the steps again. So I did. I shared in my fifth step, I let everything out. And then I get to the sixth step and I got turned on to this book called Drop the Rock. And I started reading that book, and man, it was over my head. I could not understand what I was reading in that book. And I started a meeting to help learn about it, and that meeting's still going strong today. I'm glad to say. I'm thankful that more people care about step 6 and 7. But when I'm talking about step 4, I'm talking about being fearless. When I make an inventory of my resentments and my fears and my other harms, whether they be sexual or non-sexual, okay, I got to understand that whatever I'm selfish with is what I'm resentful about. And whatever I'm dishonest with is what I'm afraid of. So it took me a long time to learn that. If you think about what it tells us to do in the 11th step, think about at the end of our day, are we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? We're really doing a mini 4th step right there. But, admitting to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs, it doesn't necessarily mean in the 5th step that I'm admitting what I did. What it means is that I'm admitting the nature of what I did, the reason that I did it. It doesn't matter if I stole, $500,000. The motivation to steal the $500,000 is the reason that I did it. That's what I need to talk about. And then when I get to step 6, what does it say? We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. If it's not a these yet, that means I haven't owned it. I have to own the defect before I can ask God in the next step to remove it. So, do I want to remain who I was, or do I want to change into who I could be? The folks in my area that have known me know me today as a big mouth. I'm a guy that's got something to say on everything. But I'm also a guy who's very, very busy in Alcoholics Anonymous. So busy that a couple of years ago, my sponsor, my grand sponsor, and someone in this room today, thank you, RH, sat me down one day and said, you're doing too much. They told me that I was making a mistake, that I was going to burn out, and then they asked me a question. They said, why are you doing all this in Alcoholics Anonymous? And I was doing workshops, I was sponsoring people, bringing meetings into the jail. I was serving at district level, at intergroup level, and area level, all at the same time. Okay, I'm doing all of these things at once. They said to me, why are you doing all this? And you know what my response was? Because I enjoy it. And they told me that I had made even my service selfish. And I was like, ouch, ouch. I had brought my character defects into Alcoholics Anonymous and let them out of their cage and could not even see it. And mind you, folks, I was 7 years sober at this point. So, for me, it wasn't until I started studying the traditions and the concepts that I started to get the quality of recovery that I am proud of today. Once I learned how to apply the steps of my life, the next gradual thing was to learn how to apply the traditions in my life and the concepts in my life. And one of our soon-to-be delegates, which is now a past delegate, started a meeting on Skype way before Zoom was even a thing. We started doing a service manual study, and I got turned on to the other side of the triangles. There's 3 sides in the triangle, all of which are equal, right? Unity, service, and recovery. Recovery has to be the foundation. That's why it's at the bottom. But the unity and the service are equal on the sides, and they support each other. And what I had to learn was that the steps, the traditions, and the concepts are all parallel in our lives. The steps help me. The traditions help me in relationships, and the concepts help me in a relationship of relationships on a higher level. And once I learned how to start applying these things, my life changed. And I could finally say that I knew how to work step 7. But it wasn't until I was about 6 years sober that I fully understood step 7. And what it means to me today is that I'm not perfect and I'm never going to be perfect. And the more humble I get in my imperfection, the more I can ask him to remove our shortcomings. And I love that the word our is in there instead of my. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings, because that means I'm not alone. But how many meetings have you ever been to in your life where the topic was step 7? It's just not talked about enough. In my home group, Drop the Rock, we study steps 6 and 7 every week. That's what we do. So step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. It sounds like such an easy thing to do, to make a list. But I'm preparing myself for the next level of my recovery. I'm preparing myself to right the wrongs, right? And step 8, what I got to start doing is forgiving myself for what I've done. When I get to step 9, I start seeking justice and righting the wrongs. That it says here, may direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Okay, wherever possible, not whenever. That means people aren't just going to show up when I think they should. They're going to come at an unusual time. You'd be surprised at how some of the amends in my life have played out based on simple acts of just being in the right place at the right time. And then I got to step 10, and I continue to take personal inventory. I work step 11, and I improve my conscious contact with God. And step 12, I try to help others. So I say all that to say this. I've done none of it right. None of it. I've made so many mistakes in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I am so grateful for the other people in my life that have helped me see my mistakes. People that have taken their time and hurt my feelings because I'm sensitive, right? I'm just a big baby. But at the same time, these are people that have told me the truth when I needed to hear it. People that have loved on me enough to be willing to hurt my feelings so that I can grow to the next level. Step 10 is all about living a way of life, living steps 4 through 9. But step 11 is where I try to improve my conscious contact. The higher power in Alcoholics Anonymous is really all it's cracked up to be. I mean, it started out as the book, then it moved to the steps, then it moved to the group, then it moved to some entity, and it just evolved into what it is today, where, God is everywhere all the time and everything for me. I don't know about you. I'm not trying to tell you what to believe by any way, shape, or form. But what I am saying is that there are no accidents in my life. I don't see anything as coincidental anymore. I don't see anything as by chance. I see everything as fitting a divine purpose. And sometimes I don't like it. Hoo-hoo. Right? Sometimes it's not convenient. I was saddened when Tanya, my AA mama, passed. Is it a coincidence that she died on my anniversary date of sobriety? Is it a coincidence that I quit smoking on hers? I mean, you just can't plan things like that, right? So I took my last drink on December 11th, 2011. And I planned it all out. I was going to sleep in my office. I went and got 4 tall boys of Mickey's, 4 32-ounce. If you're going to go out and drink, and it's your last drunk, please don't make it Mickey's, man, because that stuff is awful. But I put one of them into my body. I'm starting on the second one, and all of a sudden, all of these voices started going on in my head. I started hearing all of these slogans. Think, think, think. Right? But for the grace of God, think the drink through. All of these meetings that I had been to for such a long time. It worked, man. It really worked in my life. Somehow, some way, a moment of clarity peeked through, and I went in the bathroom and I dumped out the rest of the alcohol. Folks, that is the only time in my entire life that I have drank alcohol and not gotten drunk. The very last time. But, I was still doing other things. And I was going to a men's meeting at the time. My sobriety date is February 22nd, 2012, but I took my last drink on December 11th, 2011. So there's roughly 70 days in between where I was doing something else, which is now legal if you got the right kind of card. I'm not saying anything other than it's not for me, because I don't believe in changing the way that I feel. But I got honest outside of a men's meeting. I told the guy, I said, look, I'm still doing this. I'm still smoking weed. And the guy looked me right in the eyes and he said, dude, you're an idiot. You're not sober. Please don't share in the meeting because nobody wants to hear what you have to say. And I was so pissed that I wanted to hit the guy, right? But, he told me the truth and he saved my life. He saved my life, that guy, because I put it down and, I've never gone back, knock on wood. I never will. The life I live today is wonderful. It's beautiful. I got 4 kids, 21, 17, 16, and 14. Gets a little crazy around here sometimes, but I've got plenty of God to keep me sane. Don't know about them though. You know, my wife and I will be married 25 years in February. I'm the luckiest guy on earth. You know, I'm involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. I serve it in the intergroup as the workshop chair, doing workshops in the area, newly formed committee. I also serve on the archives committee, thanks to guys like Tom W., who's here in the room today, great influence. And I stay active in district meetings and at my home group. You know, I believe you should only have one home group. I believe you should only have one vote. And that vote comes wherever you serve, not how many hats you wear. So today, you know, I'd like to close with a reading here. And I'll talk about it here for a minute and then we'll wrap up. But I'd like to close with the 10th step promises, which you can find on the bottom of page 84. I'm just going to read them here. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time, sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. And then there's an exclamation point, one of the few that are in the big book. I challenge you to find them all. That is the miracle of it. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we have been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. That is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. You know, if you're still swearing off, if you're still struggling with alcohol, please don't do what I did. Raise your hand, pull somebody aside and tell them. Find somebody that you can open up to. I wasted the first 3.5 years of my recovery because I was too scared to talk to anybody, right? I wasn't mature enough, whatever you want to say. But today, I've been placed in a position of neutrality. I'm safe and protected. You know, I look out there at all of the faces of you all are just friends that I haven't met yet, every single one of you. Because we all have the common connection of Alcoholics Anonymous. We all have the common power greater than ourselves. So in closing, I'd like to say thank you to the group for inviting me. I hope I didn't ramble on too much. I believe in service work. I believe in staying involved and thanks again.